My name is Dr. Vandana Shiva. I'm from India, originally a physicist. Now I save seeds, work with small farmers, protect the earth, and stick to the truth that I know from my experience, relationships, life.
D'abord, vous êtes ici depuis hier, depuis mercredi, vous avez participé au Global Solidarity Summit, qui sont des conférences où on discute de l'avenir du monde. Quel est votre sentiment sur cette mobilisation anti-G20 à Hambourg? What is your feeling? You're here since yesterday, I think?
Yesterday.
Yeah, you've been at the Global Solidarity Summit. What is your feeling about this mobilization against the G20 in Hamburg?
I think the mobilization against G20, from my experience of yesterday, which was both the Solidarity Summit as well as a reading at a literature festival with the top artists and writers of Germany, showed that the awakening to the world order that has been built in the last 20 years, of which the G20 is a very small part. The G20 was created when the world financial crisis took place in 2008. And basically it is the equivalent of the bailout of the banks. American government used taxpayer money to bail out the banks that had stolen from the people. In a similar way, the G20 has both been created by the same financial interests, who are 1%. Yeah. To find bigger markets, and I witness daily how my beautiful India, which was not part of that financial slavery, is being pushed into it with the most violent structural imposition of law and policy. And second, to have more people to bail them out when things will go wrong, because it is a financial system and an economic model that must keep going crisis to crisis to crisis. More and more people are realizing that this economic system is not just unjust and brutal and is harming the planet. But I think they're also realizing that there are good alternatives all over. And so more people are outraged. More people are outraged with a group of 20 leaders coming here to push that agenda further on the wrong track. I think people should express their protest in the ways that they are most comfortable in. And there are times where there's a very natural creation of the condition of a broader unity across diversity, and at other times they're not. So one doesn't have to prematurely push for uniformity when it's not necessary. We need unity. And unity emerges when the alliances are deep and everyone knows each other well and trusts each other. My philosophy has grown out of Gandhi's thinking, where he pulled out a spinning wheel to defeat the British Empire, and I pulled out the seeds to defeat the Monsanto Empire. So small, in many places, is bigger than one big. So I believe deeply in diversity, in decentralized action, and action that is so available to every person in every day, which is why I talk of Earth democracy. That you can have one big protest one day, but our lives must change every day.
La police d'Hambourg a expulsé plusieurs camps depuis ces derniers jours, a utilisé par exemple des canons à eau contre les militants. Vous condamnez ces violences?
I watched the violence used against very peaceful protests of the against the World Trade Organization in Seattle. And in fact, that was the first time the big system got scared that people have power. Many of my own friends were arrested. Many of my own friends had tear gas, etc. I watched how the police waited till some fringe elements created violence and then arrested the non-violent protesters. So there is a partnership between police and those who engage in violence to then rub everyone in society as a potentially violent person. I think as the concentration of wealth increases, and as the need for the wealthy to use the governments to protect their wealth increases, you get a corporate state. The state is no more a public state, you get a corporate state. And at the end of it, the corporate state has to become a militarized state. It is in the structure of the beast. And what we see with large number of police everywhere, including right outside this hotel, There are 10 of them and about 100 policemen. And there's no problem here. So what we will get is militarized societies. That is why these protests and these movements are very important, because they're not just about stopping the inequalities that are becoming brutal, that are taking lives of people, but also stopping these inequalities that are leading, on the one hand, to a politics of hate and fear, and on the other hand, the militarization of our societies and the creation of police states.
You were talking about the violence used by the demonstrator. In Hamburg, there is a big neighborhood named St. Pauli. This is where the anti-fascist movement is. They use violence against the police, against Nazi people, or something like that. They are in the wrong way?
Well, the reading I had to do yesterday from this German who went to France, Stefan Hessel, I think, and then became part of the resistance movement there, and was part of the writing of the UN.
Very famous.
Was part of the drafting of the UN Declaration of Human Rights, and at 93 he wrote a text which we read yesterday, Indignation, right? And the part I had to read was about violence and non-violence. And I totally agree with him, where he says non-violence has to be the principle. And the demand for non-violent economies, the demand for non-violent structures of state, the demand for non-violent systems in every aspect of our life, I say non-violent agriculture and food system, has to be the most important. But even Gandhi, the most important apostle, said there will be moments where violence is necessary to protect those I love. But it's a very exceptional circumstance. It should not be the routine. Fascism was an exceptional circumstance. And because certain ways of defending people had to be used then, doesn't mean that we adopt violence as a philosophy of change.
N'importe quel G20, G8 rencontre, il y a des affrontements, il y a des manifestations. Ça devient presque une part du folklore. Est-ce que c'est encore utile?
I think as decision-making has become more removed from people and their lives and has become undemocratic and has gone to these kind of platforms, World Bank meetings, IMF meetings, WTO meetings, G20 meetings, G7 meetings, it is in the nature of society to want to be present, to have their voice heard. But it is not enough for democracy, because democracy has to be practiced where we are. We can't reduce democracy to a protest when the big guys meet. It's everyday life.
Ce G20 a lieu dans un contexte particulier. C'est le premier grand rendez-vous depuis le retrait des USA de l'accord de Paris. Qu'est-ce que vous a d'abord inspiré ce retrait?
Well, the first thing is that Donald Trump, by saying I will withdraw from the Paris Climate Treaty, is basically saying I will be irresponsible. He's not saying I will shrink the footprint of the United States, which is the biggest footprint on the planet. That country with a small population uses more resources, emits more greenhouse gases than any other country. It is the biggest polluter. And he didn't say, I'm going to reduce pollution, but I'll do it at my level. He said, I'm going to not reduce pollution. I'm still going to grab the resources of the world. I will still bully India, and I will not agree to an international system. That's why I called him yesterday in one of my talks a rogue player. Elephants live in a herd. And when an elephant becomes antisocial, it leaves the herd and becomes a rogue and then starts to do damage.
So Donald Trump is this kind of elephant?
He's a rogue elephant. He's a rogue elephant. And as a rogue elephant, I think it is the duty of the G20, which is both an intimate platform. It's not a multilateral platform. It's an intimate platform of 20 people. We'll have lots of dinners and we'll have lots of hugging and lots of kissing, that everyone should tell him, you want to stay on in this family and this herd of G20, don't be a rogue.
You think that's going to happen, really?
I don't think so.
Vous pensez que Donald Trump a tué l'accord du climat en se retirant?
I have, through my life, evolved the concept of earth democracy. And therefore, I do not ever see all power lying in humans, and I definitely do not see all power lying in Donald Trump. So Donald Trump, by saying I will not adhere to Paris commitments, has actually helped the climate movement. Why? He's helped the climate movement by making the climate movement realize there's so many levels at which action can happen. California, New York have already said, if he has said he's walking out, we are not, we'll stick to our commitments. City after city in the United States is starting to say, we will meet our emissions targets to be part of the international community that is connected through a common atmosphere. So Trump, by misbehaving and being a rogue, has allowed democracy to be more active at different levels. And what I'm hoping is ordinary American citizens will start saying, what is it that I can do to correct the mess? How is it that I, as a member of American society, can spread a movement so that America is not the biggest polluter and we become part of the solution? Well, people coming out, people not just coming out and physically marching, but people reflecting, thinking, assessing, choosing, that is democracy. The first thing I would say to 20 leaders, 2 of them women, most of them men, would be don't forget you're part of the earth and you're earth citizens first. And stop your arrogance. And stop your civility. Stop your arrogance with respect to society and your civility with respect to big money. Don't behave like the Sherpas of the 1%. The second thing I would tell to them is your first place to get signals of what's happening is in your countries. I would tell my Prime Minister, farmers are protesting, farmers are dying, farmers are committing suicide. Pay attention to it. India, of a population of 1.3 billion, 60% of them as farmers, you keep devastating their livelihoods to be a serf for a Monsanto and a Cargill and a Bayer and all of the global multinationals, and you're willing to kill your own people, beyond a point, you will destroy this amazing civilization. I would tell him that.
Ces derniers jours, il y a eu des hélicoptères dans le ciel, des policiers partout, des rues vont être fermées pour laisser passer les dirigeants. Ils n'ont jamais semblé aussi loin des gens.
The walls between people who are supposed to be represented by leaders and the leaders who are supposed to represent people are getting higher and higher and higher, and they're becoming bigger barricades. As I mentioned, corporate globalization, shaped by WTO, World Bank, IMF, G20, is basically a creator of the corporate state where governments stop serving their people. They stop being of the people, by the people, for the people. They start being of the corporations, by the corporations, for the corporations. And when more and more freedoms and more civil liberties and more resources and more livelihoods are stolen from the people to make the global corporate empire run, because it can't run without stealing from people. Bayer won't make its super profits without patents on its medicine, and which means it will push people who have cancer into deep distress. Monsanto can't make its profits without squeezing royalties from farmers or selling more glyphosate, which should be banned. So corporate profits are at the cost of the planet and the cost of people. There used to be a group of corporations which helped Hitler, both for making gases for the concentration camps. And Monsanto, it was a company called Mobe, and all of the others, even including the Americans, had partnerships with what was called the IG Farben, which was the cartel, the chemical cartel here. But they also made the poison gases that killed French soldiers. They were tried at the Nuremberg trials for the genocide. They then continued as providers of food, that without our chemicals and our pesticides, food won't grow. Then they brought GMOs and said, without our GMOs, food won't grow. And the killers re-modified their presentation to be the saviors of humanity. Okay, they are still the Poison Cartel. And now they've reduced again to 3, like they were in Hitler's time. Bayer and Monsanto have merged. Dow and DuPont have merged. Syngenta and ChemChina have merged.
It's a cartel.
It's a cartel. So I call it the Poison Cartel. In my view, this is the most serious threat we face, because the Poison Cartel invades into everyone's lives. Whether you're a farmer, it invades into your life and makes your life unviable. If you're eating, it poisons you. When you fall sick with cancer, they're the guys who sell you the patented medicine. So the Poison Cartel is really the new slave system. And they rule through poisons. So it's a double attack. Slavery in any condition is wrong. But a poison slavery kills you while you are a slave too.
It's creepy.
Yeah. Now, in the issue of liability, I think the big issue is this. We had a Bhopal disaster in 1984. The company was called Union Carbide. It was bought by Dow. Today, Dow has merged with DuPont. Our struggle to say Dow DuPont is liable for Bhopal hasn't died. The women of Bhopal are still fighting for justice. In a similar way, even though Bayer will merge with Monsanto, our fight to say you're responsible for every farmer who bought BT cotton, got into debt, committed suicide, you have a liability. We're not going to end that fight just because they've merged. They might think that they can disappear. We will continue till this poison cartel is brought to account. Today, the governments have become extensions of empire. They become extensions of the corporate empire. And their first aim is not to listen to their people, to represent the will of their people. Their first aim is to trample on their people in order to protect their masters. That's why I call them Sherpas. You see, in the G20, there's a word called Sherpas, which are supposed to be the officials who do the background work. But my analysis is that the leaders themselves are the Sherpas of big money. Okay. It's not that they have invisible bureaucrats who do their work, but they are visible leaders who are actually working for invisible masters who are really trying to be the masters of the universe. And it is absolutely inevitable that if this economic system has to survive, it must take away the freedoms of people through more police action, through more surveillance, through more militarization. That's why fighting the economics of the G20, the economics of World Trade Organization, the economics of global corporate rule is a peace activity, because only by distributing wealth and power in society will we have peaceful societies. Otherwise, we'll have police just everywhere.
Quand je vous entends parler de la liberté qui est prise pièce par pièce aux gens du peuple, le futur semble très sombre.
You know, every time that I see a future of darkness being imposed, I'd ask myself, what is the little lamp that I can light that'll take the darkness away? Because all it takes is a little lamp. For me, it is the seed. It's our seed freedom, our food freedom, our determination to govern ourselves, our determination to not allow our minds to be colonized by the false ideas and false narratives through which corporate rule is being institutionalized, to stay free.